Deep beneath the streets of Rome, past the marble altars and the echo of 1,000 prayers, lies a door few eyes have ever seen. It is guarded not by soldiers, but by silence. Behind it, corridors stretch into shadow, shelves of ancient vellum, sealed scrolls and forbidden texts that have slept for centuries. The Vatican's secret archives, a name whispered with reverence and suspicion alike. For nearly 500 years, popes and scholars have protected this labyrinth of memory. It holds over 85 kilometers of manuscripts, decrees, letters, lost chronicles and gospels never allowed to reach the light. Officially, the Church calls it the Apostolic Archive, but in truth many still call it by its older name, Archivum Secretum, Apostolicum, Vaticanum, the secret archive of the Vatican. And within those walls, rumor says, lies a text so ancient, so dangerous, that it could rewrite how humanity understands the story of Christ. They call it the hidden gospel, not because it denies Christ, but because it reveals too much. A gospel that speaks of his childhood, his hidden years, his words that the canonical texts only hint at. Some say it was written by one of his closest followers, and perhaps Mary Magdalene or Thomas the Twin. Others claim it came from the first generation of believers, those who walked with him and saw what the world was never meant to see. Why would such a text be hidden? Why would the Church, which guards the Word of God, seal away a gospel written in his name? History offers clues. After the first centuries of the faith, when persecution turned to power, hundreds of writings circulated across the Christian world, gospels, acts, revelations, and prayers. Some were truth, others deception. In the 4th century, the bishops gathered to define what was scripture and what was not. 4 gospels remained. Dozens vanished, but fragments survived, in Coptic sands, in Greek monasteries, in the memories of monks who copied forbidden lines in secret ink. And centuries later, some of those fragments began to reappear. In 1945, in the Egyptian desert near Nag Hammadi, a farmer struck clay with his shovel and unearthed a jar filled with scrolls untouched since the early church. Inside them were gospels long lost to time, the Gospel of Thomas, the Gospel of Philip, and hints of others never seen before. But one document, scholars whispered, was different, one that vanished again before it could be studied. The Vatican, they said, took it and locked it beneath St. Peter's shadow. This is where our journey begins, between light and darkness, faith and secrecy, where history hides what heaven once revealed. Because the question is not whether a hidden gospel exists, the question is why it was hidden, and what truth might still lie waiting, sealed beneath the heart of Rome. For centuries, whispers moved through monasteries like wind through corridors, rumors of a text spoken of but never seen, called by those who feared it Evangelium Lucis, the Gospel of Light. Its first mention appears not in heresy trials, but in the writings of a 4th century monk named Serapion of Thamuis. In a letter found in fragments, he warns his brothers, "A gospel circulates among some, written not by men, but by angels of light who appeared in Galilee. Keep it hidden, for the unready may lose faith by reading what they cannot bear." For historians, these lines are a paradox, both confession and caution. Why would a bishop of the early church admit the existence of a book said to be dictated by angels, and yet urge that it be hidden rather than destroyed? The answer lies in the wars of the soul that shook Christianity in its youth. When Rome's emperors turned from paganism to Christ, the faith became power, and power feared mystery. The bishops gathered at councils, sorting light from shadow, orthodoxy from imagination. In those councils, they chose 4 gospels as the pillars of the faith: Matthew, Mark, Luke, John. But for every chosen book, 10 others were cast out, not all for lies, but for revealing what was too divine, too human, too wild for the order of empire. The Gospel of Light was among those said to be sealed away. It described not new doctrines, but the missing years of Jesus, the years between the boy in the temple and the man at the Jordan. According to fragments cited centuries later by the mystic Clement of Alexandria, it spoke of the secret of the 2 lights, one seen in the world, and one that lives within men. That phrase troubled theologians. Was it metaphor, or was it hinting at something long suppressed, the belief that divine light dwells not only above, but within the human heart. When Christianity became the religion of empire, that idea became dangerous. A church built on hierarchy could not allow a text suggesting that every soul bore the same fire that spoke creation into being. So the gospel was buried, not destroyed, but hidden. Some said its last known copy was taken by monks fleeing persecution from Antioch. Others whispered that it was translated into Latin in secret and kept beneath the catacombs of the Vatican itself, locked behind lead doors beside the papal bulls of empire. And once a century, so the rumor goes, a chosen scholar was permitted to read it, not to publish, not to teach, only to guard it. But traces survived in silence. Medieval mystics spoke of the inner light of Christ. Renaissance theologians hinted at the word burning in man as once it burned in Mary. Each time the church tightened its control, echoes of the forbidden gospel rose again, as if the truth itself could not be erased. And deep within the archives, where dust and time share one breath, the catalogues still list an unnamed codex, Evangelium Lucis. Its location, sub secreto, beneath the seal. Its contents, unknown. That is where our search must lead, through the labyrinth beneath. Rome, where knowledge and secrecy intertwine, and where the pages of the hidden gospel may still wait for the day heaven decides humanity is ready to see. Beneath the marble floors of St. Peter's Basilica lies another world, a city of stone and silence where daylight has never entered. The air is thick, the walls ancient, lined with countless doors without names. This is the true Vatican beneath the Vatican, the Archivum Secretum, founded by Pope Paul V in 1612 and sealed by centuries of power few ever enter. Even cardinals require written permission from the Pope himself. No photographs are allowed, no phones, no pens, and only gloves, silence, and the gaze of a watchful guard. The archives stretch for nearly 85 kilometers, winding beneath the apostolic palace like a maze built to hide the soul of history. In those endless corridors rest the church's deepest memories, the trial records of Galileo, letters from Michelangelo, the excommunication of kings, the pleas of queens, the notes of inquisitors, and manuscripts written by hands that trembled under candlelight. But beyond the rooms scholars are permitted to see, there are others, rooms without catalogue numbers, sealed by bronze locks older than empires. Those doors are whispered to guard what even history dares not record. Among archivists there is one legend that refuses to die. They call it the Chamber of Silence. It is said to lie 5 levels below the public archive, accessible only through a narrow stair hidden behind a false wall in the hall of Gregory III. No record of it exists, except one. In 1929, a Jesuit historian named Father Ernesto Pellegrini claimed to have been summoned to assist in cataloguing an anonymous Greek codex recovered from a monastic library in Cappadocia. In his private notes discovered after his death, he wrote, "We descended beyond the permitted levels. The air was cold and smelled of dust and myrrh. A single lamp burned before an iron door marked with a cross of 7 rays. Inside, on a pedestal of black marble, lay a box wrapped in crimson silk. The archivist called it Evangelium Lucis, the Gospel of Light. I saw the title only once, for the light flickered and they covered it again." Weeks later, Pellegrini was reassigned to missionary work in Brazil. He never returned to Rome. In 1933, his letters ceased. His body was never found. Was he silenced? Or had he seen something that changed his faith forever? Decades later, another Jesuit, Father Luis Esteban, working in the archives during the papacy of John XXIII, wrote a cryptic remark in his journal. "Not all Gospels are meant for the pulpit. Some are kept for the time when man remembers how to listen." It is the same phrasing that appears in a margin note from the 4th century, beside Serapian's letter warning of the Gospel of Light. The handwriting, separated by 1,500 years, carries the same phrase, as though time itself had kept the secret alive. If the Vatican truly holds this manuscript, why hide it? Perhaps it is not heresy that frightens them, but revelation, a truth that would make power tremble. For if the lost gospel teaches that the divine spark dwells within every soul, the authority of any institution built on mediation would vanish. The question is no longer if the gospel exists, but when it will be revealed, and by whose hands, because the Church has always known that silence is not absence. It is waiting, and deep under the stones of Rome, the gospel of light may still wait for its appointed hour, when the walls of the archives will tremble, and what was once hidden beneath St. Peter's shadow will rise to the sun. No one knows when the seal was broken, or by whose trembling hands. Some claim it was during the upheaval of the Second World War, when bombs fell near the Tiber, and fear loosened even the strongest locks. Others say it happened centuries earlier, that monks copying texts by candlelight risked their lives to read what Rome had forbidden. What survived from the Evangelium Lucis is not a book, but fragments quoted in whispers, smuggled in letters, hidden within other manuscripts under false names. In 1972, a French scholar named Armand Delacour claimed to have seen a copy of several pages preserved in microfilm among confiscated materials from the archives of Monte Cassino. His report vanished after publication, but before it did, he recorded a handful of verses, words he swore were written in ancient Greek, attributed to Jesus himself. The light was not sent to be worshipped, but to awaken. Every heart that remembers the first fire becomes my temple. The kingdom you seek is not in stone or sky. It is within you, waiting to be seen. Those lines shook the academic world. To some, they sounded like the echo of John's gospel. The light shines in the darkness, and the darkness has not overcome it. To others, they were a challenge to the Church's authority, a reminder that the divine cannot be contained within walls or rituals. Delacour described other verses as well. When men build towers to reach heaven, they forget that heaven has already come down. The veil is not outside you and it is upon your eyes. Simple, poetic, and devastating. If authentic, these words would place the gospel of light not among the heretical writings of later centuries, but within the first generation of Christian mysticism. A voice that understood Christ not only as Redeemer, but as the light awakening every soul. The Vatican has never confirmed or denied the existence of those fragments, yet in 1985, a new directive quietly appeared within the Pontifical Biblical Commission. A warning against the study or publication of unverified apocryphal sources suggesting interior divinity apart from Christ's mediation. The phrasing matched the themes of the Evangelium Lucis exactly. Could these verses truly belong to the voice of Jesus? Or are they reflections of early mystics seeking to preserve what official theology could not bear? History offers no proof, only patterns. Whenever the Church silenced one mystery, another rose in its place. The Dead Sea Scrolls, Nag Hammadi, Qumran, the lost gospel of the Hebrews. And through every age, the same idea endured like an ember under ash, that God once spoke not only to humanity, but through it. That is the fourth secret. The divine word never belonged to a single tongue. It breathes wherever faith dares to listen. Delacour disappeared a year after publishing his notes. His family received a single envelope with no return address. Inside a torn page written in Greek and Latin, the word is not lost. It waits in those who remember. If the fragments were real, they were gone again, absorbed back into silence, guarded by those who believe some truths are too dangerous to speak. But silence cannot bury fire. And somewhere beneath Rome, perhaps in a vault still sealed by 7 locks, lies the rest of the Gospel of Light, a text that might not destroy faith, but set it free. For 2,000 years, the Church has called itself the guardian of truth, the living bridge between heaven and earth. But guardianship can become possession. And possession, when touched by fear, becomes control. In the vaulted halls of the Vatican, truth has often walked hand in hand with secrecy. It was never only to deceive, but to protect. For truth, once unleashed, can destroy as easily as it can redeem. That is the paradox the Church has wrestled with since its birth. How to preserve revelation without losing power. When the bishops of the early councils gathered in the 4th century, the empire was trembling. Paganism was dying, but its philosophies were not. Greek mystics spoke of a divine spark in man, Egyptian priests of the hidden light within the soul. To survive, Christianity needed to define, to draw lines, to name what was sacred and what was forbidden, and anything that blurred the distance between God and man was feared. If the gospel of light truly spoke of the divine living within humanity, not above it, then it shattered the hierarchy on which the Church itself stood. A pope could bless, a priest could absolve, but if the kingdom was already inside every heart, then no wall, no altar, no intermediary, could claim monopoly over salvation. That is the heart of the danger, not blasphemy, but freedom. For freedom terrifies institutions built on obedience. Throughout history, each time a movement rediscovered this truth, it was silenced. The Gnostics in the 2nd century, the Cathars in the 13th, the mystics of Spain and France, women and men who spoke of union with God not through the church, but through direct vision. Many burned, others vanished into monasteries, their writings hidden behind coded metaphors that scholars still struggle to decipher. And yet the message never died. It surfaced in the words of Saint Teresa of Avila, who said, "The soul is the dwelling place of God." John of the Cross, who wrote, "I entered within myself, and in my heart I saw the Lord." They were canonized, but only centuries later. When the danger of their words had passed, the Vatican, some say, never truly feared heresy. It feared the loss of mediation. Because mediation is power, the ability to stand between the divine and the human, to translate heaven into language men can understand. But if the gospel of light proves that no translation is needed, that the voice of God already speaks within, then the foundation of the hierarchy trembles. This is why the archives remain locked, not because they hold falsehood, but because they hold too much truth. Truth that can no longer be controlled once revealed. And yet prophecy has always whispered that what is hidden will one day be unveiled. Jesus himself said, "There is nothing concealed that will not be disclosed, or hidden that will not be made known." Perhaps that promise includes even the words of the forbidden gospel, for the church's silence may not be eternal. Every few generations, something slips through. A scholar's note, a rediscovered fragment, a trace of the voice once buried. Each is a spark from that hidden fire, and if that fire ever breaks free, it will not destroy faith. It will purify it, for faith that cannot face truth is already an illusion, and truth, even when feared, remains divine. If Rome hides its truths beneath marble and gold, the desert hides them beneath silence. It was here, among the shifting dunes of Egypt and the limestone caves of Syria, that time itself became the guardian of memory. For centuries, monks fled persecution and power alike, carrying with them the texts that did not fit Rome's order. And in that exile, parchment became prophecy. In 1945, the world caught a glimpse of what the desert remembers. Two farmers digging for fertilizer near Nag Hammadi struck clay instead. A sealed jar tall as a man's arm. Inside were 13 leather-bound codices, perfectly preserved beneath the sand. They contained 52 ancient writings, secret prayers, lost dialogues, and gospels thought destroyed. Among them, the Gospel of Thomas spoke in riddles of light and spirit, echoing the same mystery as the Evangelium Lucis. "If you bring forth what is within you, what you bring forth will save you." That line alone ignited decades of debate. Scholars wondered, were Thomas and the Gospel of Light fragments of the same revelation? Did both preserve an older, unfiltered voice of Christ, before creed, before empire? One fragment from Nag Hammadi mentions the word that burns within the silence, a phrase nearly identical to the one quoted by Father Pellegrini in the Vatican records centuries later. Coincidence or continuity? Every discovery seems to lead back to the same invisible thread, one truth weaving through the sands, the scrolls and the vaults. In the 1990s, a team of Syrian archaeologists uncovered a ruined monastery near Malula, its frescoes blackened by fire. Beneath the altar lay a chest of cedar sealed with wax. Inside, a single sheet of papyrus, half crumbled, but legible enough to read a single phrase in Greek. The word walks again among men, but men do not see. The handwriting, carbon dated to the 2nd century, matched known Coptic scribes from the same region where early Christians fled after Jerusalem fell. Was it a copy of the Gospel of Light, or one of many inspired by it? When the find was reported to the Vatican's Congregation for the Doctrine of the Faith, the site was quietly closed. The fragments were relocated for preservation. No publication followed. The monastery remains sealed to this day. Still, the desert keeps its secrets. Wind buries, but it also reveals. Each century, another layer of sand gives way, and what was lost breathes again. The Bedouin who first found the Nag Hammadi texts said he felt a wind like fire when he opened the jar, as if something ancient had been waiting to be remembered. That is the 6th secret. Truth does not die. It waits for rediscovery. For every lock in Rome there is a whisper in the wilderness. Every secret guarded by stone is already written in the dust, waiting for the right hands to lift it. And perhaps that is why the gospel of light remains hidden, not to be controlled, but to be timed. For revelation is not only what is told, but when it is told. The desert has kept its silence for 2 millennia, but the winds are shifting again, and some say that deep in the caves of Qumran, under the same rock where the Dead Sea Scrolls first slept, a sealed jar remains unopened, marked not with Hebrew letters, but with a single sign, a sun surrounded by 12 rays. Not every secret escapes Rome. Some breathe behind its walls, hidden not by force but by fear. In the quiet corridors of the Vatican, whispers move faster than light. Priests, scholars, archivists, men sworn to obedience, speak carefully in coded words, in passing glances. For even inside the holy city, there are those who believe the Evangelium Lucis was never meant to stay buried. One such man was Monsignor Pietro Lamberti, a theologian and translator in the Pontifical Biblical Commission during the 1970s. In 2002, his nephew released a private journal found among his papers after his death. In it, a single line repeated through the pages. "It is not apocrypha, it is testimony." According to the journal, Lamberti was chosen to assist in the transcription of a damaged manuscript written in early Koine Greek and Latin, fragments from a codex catalogued only as SL 241. He described the pages as faint, the ink like dust, the letters burned by time. Yet one phrase appeared more than any other. "The light became man so that man might remember he is light." Lamberti's notes say he was told to stop translating after only 6 pages. The project was transferred to another department, and he was reassigned to teaching. He never spoke of it again. But before his death, he confided to a fellow scholar, "If what I read is true, then all religion must return to its beginning, not temples, but hearts." 2 decades later, another name surfaced, Sister Maria Elena de la Cruz, a Dominican nun who served as an archivist's assistant. In a recorded interview from 2018, she described cleaning a sealed vault after a flood near the Vatican's lower levels. There were boxes marked only with the papal seal. One had burned edges, like it had survived a fire. I was told never to open them. But when I lifted one lid, I saw parchment, and on the first line it said in Latin, "Lux intra vos est," "The light is within you." Her voice trembles in the recording. I knew what it meant. I closed it and prayed for forgiveness. But I also prayed that one day it would be revealed. After her testimony spread online, she was moved to a cloistered convent in southern Italy. The video was deleted. The transcript remains. It is always the same message, echoed across centuries, across continents, across every attempt to erase it. That the divine is not distant, that heaven is not elsewhere, that the kingdom of God is not coming, it is already here, within, and yet the Vatican remains silent. Perhaps it is waiting for a moment of unity, when such a truth would heal rather than divide. Or perhaps silence itself has become the final form of control. One anonymous priest once wrote in a letter to a journalist who dared to ask too much. "There are words that could end the church as you know it, but not faith. Faith would survive. The word would survive. Only the throne would fall. That is the 7th secret. What is hidden may not protect the truth, it may protect the world from it. For every revelation comes with a cost. And perhaps the Vatican guards this gospel, not to suppress belief, but to preserve its fragile balance, until humanity learns to handle the fire it once feared, because the gospel of light, if ever unveiled, would not demand worship. It would demand transformation. The wind moves differently in Rome at night. The crowds fade, the bells fall silent, and the Vatican stands like a mountain of stone, guarding a secret the world has long forgotten how to hear. Beneath the domes and catacombs, the vault remains sealed. But the story perhaps no longer needs the key. For every attempt to bury the Evangelium Lucis, its message escaped, not through rebellion, but remembrance. The same words whispered through time, "The light is within you." They appeared in the songs of desert monks, in the visions of mystics, in the prayers of saints who never read the hidden gospel, but somehow already knew it. Maybe that is the greatest mystery of all, that what the church tried to contain had already been written in every soul that ever searched for God. What if the gospel of light was never just a text, but a mirror? What if its words were not meant for parchment, but for the heart? Because the fragments all say the same thing. In Greek, Latin, and silence, the kingdom is within. Look through the centuries and you'll see it, a divine pattern repeating itself. When faith hardens into law, when truth becomes property, revelation slips through cracks in the marble and finds its way back to the humble, a fisherman, a monk, a child, a woman praying alone in a dark room. The word keeps choosing the small, the unseen, the ones with nothing left but faith. Maybe that is why the gospel was hidden, because the light it carries cannot be owned. You can seal a vault, burn a manuscript, silence a voice, but you cannot silence the fire that burns in the heart that believes. The priests may have read it once and trembled. The popes may have locked it away. But perhaps heaven never needed their permission. Perhaps revelation is not something that happens to the church, but something that happens through creation. And if that is true, then the hidden gospel was never really hidden at all. It is in every act of mercy, every moment of forgiveness, every soul that dares to love when love costs everything. That is the final secret. The word has always been alive, and it has always been speaking. Not from altars or pulpits, but from within you. So what if the Vatican's greatest secret is not a document sealed in darkness, but a truth so radiant that no wall could contain it? What if the real gospel of light is the one you've carried all along? The voice of God reminding you that you were never separate from Him. And what if the day the Vatican finally opens its deepest vault, there is nothing there but a mirror, waiting for humanity to look inside? Then the prophecy would be fulfilled. The silence would end, and the true gospel would not be read but remembered.